Have you ever had the same passenger request a ride from you at the exact same time every single night? Have you ever noticed injuries on someone that look fresh and painful, but they never acknowledge them or seek help? What would you do if you discovered your regular passenger died years ago in a car accident on the same route you drive him every night? And when does a routine pickup become a warning that you might be next? That the road he's traveling isn't leading to his destination, but to yours? My name is Michael Torres, and I've been driving for Uber in Jerome, Arizona for 8 months. Jerome is a strange place to work, a former mining town clinging to the side of Mingus Mountain, population less than 500, full of artists, tourists, and ghosts of the past. The town itself is a National Historic Landmark, famous for being the most vertical city in America and for its haunted history. But I never believed in ghosts until I started picking up Thomas Brennan at exactly 11:47 p.m. every single night. Same pickup location on Hull Avenue. Same destination 8 miles down Highway 89A toward Cottonwood. Same silent ride through hairpin turns and steep descents. And same injuries on his face and hands, cuts, bruises, blood, that look like they happened moments ago. Even though Thomas Brennan died in a car accident on that exact stretch of road in March 2019, 5 years before I ever started driving him. I moved to Jerome in February after my life in Phoenix fell apart. Divorce, job loss. The usual cascade of failures that drives people to reinvent themselves in small towns where rent is cheap and questions are few. Jerome seemed like a good reset. Quirky, isolated, with enough tourist traffic that driving for Uber was viable despite the tiny population. Most of my rides were tourists visiting the historic buildings and art galleries, or locals heading down the mountain to Cottonwood or Clarkdale for shopping or work. The town itself is beautiful in a haunted, precarious way. Built on the side of Cleopatra Hill at a 30-degree angle, the streets wind impossibly steep through layers of historic buildings. Old mining structures cling to the hillside, many of them now housing galleries, restaurants, and shops. At night, when the tourists leave and the businesses close, Jerome becomes almost silent. Just the wind, the distant sound of shifting rock, and the sense that you're perched on the edge of something about to give way. Highway 89A is the only road connecting Jerome to the valley below. It's a terrifying drive even in daylight. Steep switchbacks, hairpin turns, sheer drops with minimal guardrails. The road descends from 5,000 feet elevation to about 3,500 feet in the span of a few miles, and the turns are so tight that trucks have to swing wide into the opposite lane. At night, it's even worse. Your headlights can only show you the pavement directly ahead before it curves away into darkness. The drop-off on the outside of each turn is invisible, just a void that could swallow your car if you missed the curve by a few feet. I'd been driving for about 3 weeks when I got my first request from Thomas Brennan. It was March 14th, a Thursday night, and I was parked outside the Spirit Room bar waiting for late-night pickups. At 11:47 p.m. exactly, my phone pinged. Thomas B., 5-star rating, pickup on Hull Avenue just above the switchback. I drove up to the location, a dark stretch of road with a few houses set back from the street, most of them vacation rentals that looked empty. A man stood on the shoulder, barely visible in the dim streetlight. As I pulled up, he opened the back door and got in without saying a word. That's when I first saw the injuries. His face had fresh cuts across the forehead and cheek, and his hands were scraped raw, knuckles bleeding. His clothes, jeans and a flannel shirt, were torn in places and stained with what looked like blood and dirt. He sat stiffly, like moving caused pain, and stared straight ahead. "Hey man, are you okay?" I asked, concerned. "Do you need me to take you to a hospital instead? You look like you've been in an accident." He didn't respond, just sat there, breathing slowly, staring at nothing. "Sir, can you hear me? Are you hurt?" Still nothing. I checked the destination on my app, an address on State Route 89A about 8 miles down the mountain toward Cottonwood. A residential area, not a hospital or urgent care. Maybe he lived there and just wanted to get home before seeking medical attention. "Okay, if you don't want to talk, that's fine," I said, feeling uneasy. "But if you need me to stop anywhere, or if you feel worse, just let me know." I started driving, heading down Hull Avenue toward Highway 89A. The ride was completely silent except for the sound of the engine and the wind. Every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, Thomas was in the exact same position, sitting upright, staring forward, hands resting on his knees. The blood on his face looked fresh, still glistening under the passing streetlights. The descent down 89A at night is nerve-wracking even when you've done it hundreds of times. The road twists back and forth down the mountain face, each switchback tighter than the last. The speed limit is 25 mph through most of it, but even that feels too fast when you can't see beyond the next curve. My headlights would illuminate guardrails and then nothing, just darkness and the knowledge that a mistake would send you tumbling hundreds of feet down the mountainside. About 4 miles down, at a particularly sharp hairpin turn, I felt something change in the car. The temperature dropped noticeably, cold enough that I could see my breath. The air felt heavy, oppressive, like pressure building before a storm. And in the rearview mirror, I saw Thomas lean forward slightly, his eyes still fixed on something ahead that I couldn't see. "Are we almost there?" he asked suddenly, his voice flat and hollow. I jumped at the sound, first words he'd spoken since getting in. "Yeah, another 4 miles or so. Are you sure you're okay? You're bleeding pretty badly." "I need to get there," he said, ignoring the question. "I need to get home." "We're going as fast as we safely can. This road doesn't allow for faster," he interrupted. "We need to go faster." "I'm not speeding on this road. It's too dangerous." He didn't respond, just leaned back again into his original position. But the temperature in the car stayed cold, and I had the distinct feeling that something was very wrong about this ride. The injuries, the silence, the sudden urgency, it all felt off in a way I couldn't articulate. We reached the destination without incident, a small house set back from the road in a residential area, where 89A levels out near the valley floor. I pulled up to the address and turned to tell Thomas we'd arrived, but he was gone. The back seat was empty. I hadn't heard the door open or close, hadn't felt any change in the car's weight distribution that would indicate someone getting out. He'd simply vanished. I sat there, staring at the empty seat, my heart pounding. The temperature in the car slowly returned to normal. I checked the app. It showed the trip as complete. 5 stars already given, a $15 tip added. But I never confirmed arrival. I never ended the trip manually. It had ended itself. I drove back to Jerome badly shaken, parked in front of my apartment and tried to make sense of what had happened. A passenger with injuries who vanished from my car without opening the door. It wasn't possible. There had to be an explanation. Maybe he'd gotten out while I was focused on the road and I hadn't noticed. Maybe the door was so well maintained it opened and closed silently. Maybe I was just exhausted and had experienced some kind of momentary dissociation. The next night, Friday, March 15th, I was working the evening shift again. At 11:47 p.m. exactly, I got another ping. Thomas B., same pickup location, same destination. I stared at the request, my hand hovering over decline, but curiosity and the need for income made me accept. He was standing in the exact same spot on Hull Avenue. Got in the same way, same injuries on his face and hands, same torn and bloodied clothes. Same silence as we drove down the mountain. Same cold air filling the car around the 4-mile mark. Same question, "Are we almost there?" And same urgency when he asked me to go faster. And at the destination, he vanished again. Just gone from the back seat without a trace. This pattern continued every single night, for weeks, then months. At 11:47 p.m., I'd get a request from Thomas B. Same pickup, same route, same silent ride, same disappearance. I started to dread that time of night, but I couldn't bring myself to stop accepting the requests. Partly because I needed the money, his ride was reliable income, but mainly because I had to understand what was happening. I tried talking to him on different nights, asking questions, trying to get him to acknowledge his injuries or explain why he needed this ride every night. He rarely responded, and when he did, it was always the same few phrases. "I need to get there. I need to get home. Are we almost there?" Like he was stuck in a loop, playing out the same journey endlessly. The injuries never changed either. Same cuts on his forehead and cheek, same scraped hands, same blood stains on his flannel shirt. They looked fresh every night like they'd just happened, but they never healed and never worsened. After about 2 months of driving Thomas every night, I finally worked up the courage to investigate. I Googled his name, Thomas Brennan, Jerome, Arizona, and found an obituary from March 2019. Thomas Joseph Brennan, age 34, died in a single-vehicle accident on State Route 89A between Jerome and Cottonwood. He'd lost control on one of the hairpin turns and gone over the side, the car tumbling several hundred feet down the mountain. He was found the next morning by a highway maintenance crew. The obituary listed survivors, parents in Prescott, a sister in Flagstaff. Services had been held at a funeral home in Cottonwood. I found the accident report through more searching. It had happened at 11:47 p.m. on March 14, 2019, exactly 5 years ago to the minute from when I first picked him up. He'd been driving down from Jerome toward his home in Cottonwood after working a late shift at one of the restaurants in town. The report suggested he'd been going too fast for the conditions, possibly trying to get home quickly, and had missed the curve at mile marker 345, the same hairpin turn where I always felt the temperature drop in my car. Thomas had been dead for 5 years, but I'd been driving him every night for 2 months. His ghost, his echo, his consciousness, whatever remained of him was replaying that final ride over and over, trying to get home, never making it, never understanding he was already dead. I should have stopped accepting the requests, should have declined every time his name appeared on my screen at 11:47 p.m., but I didn't. Partly because I felt sorry for him. This man trapped in the moment of his death, endlessly trying to complete a journey he'd never finish, and partly because I was afraid of what might happen if I refused. What if denying him the ride made things worse? What if he found another way to make that trip, and someone else got hurt? So I kept picking him up. Every night at 11:47 p.m., same pickup, same route, same destination. And slowly, over months, things started to change. The first change was subtle. About 3 months in, I noticed Thomas was sitting slightly differently in the back seat. Instead of staring straight ahead, he was looking to the right, toward the window and the drop-off beyond. And at the hairpin turn where he died, mile marker 345, he would lean forward and put his hand on the back of my seat, like he was bracing himself for impact. The second change was more disturbing. His injuries started getting worse. The cuts on his face became deeper, more ragged. His hands were mangled, fingers bent at wrong angles. His clothes were more torn, more blood-soaked. It was like I was watching his death play out in reverse, or seeing more and more of the damage that had been done when his car tumbled down the mountain. The third change was his voice. He started speaking more, but not in response to my questions. He'd mutter things under his breath. Too fast and can't see. Need to slow down. Like he was reliving his final moments, realizing too late that he was going too fast, that the curve was sharper than he'd anticipated, that he wasn't going to make it. And the fourth change, the one that terrified me most, was that he started looking at me in the rearview mirror. Not through me or past me the way he had for months, but directly at me, making eye contact. And in his eyes, I saw recognition, awareness. Like he was waking up from the loop, starting to understand what was happening to him. It was 8 months into driving Thomas, October 14th, when everything came to a head. I picked him up at 11:47 p.m. as always, but this time he spoke immediately as he got in. "You know I'm dead, don't you?" His voice was clearer than it had ever been, less hollow, more present. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Yes. I found out months ago. I'm sorry for what happened to you. Why do you keep picking me up? Why do you keep driving me down this mountain?" "I don't know, I felt like I should. Like you needed someone to, I don't know, bear witness or something." "I'm trapped," he said, his voice breaking. "I've been trapped for 5 years. Every night at 11:47 I wake up on Hull Avenue. I need to get home. I get in someone's car. Sometimes I can see the driver. Sometimes I can't. And we drive down the mountain. But I never arrive. I just vanish at the same spot and then I'm back on Hull Avenue again. Over and over, an endless loop. I'm sorry. I don't know how to help you. Maybe you can't. Maybe I'm supposed to be here forever, reliving the moment I died. But Michael, he knew my name. He'd never used my name before. I think something's changing. I think the loop is breaking down, and I'm afraid of what happens when it does. We were approaching mile marker 345, the hairpin turn where he'd died. The air in the car was freezing, colder than it had ever been. I could see ice forming on the inside of the windows. "You need to stop," Thomas said urgently. "Stop the car right now. Don't go around that curve." "Why? What's going to happen?" "The loop is collapsing. All the iterations, all the nights, they're converging. If you drive around that curve tonight, we won't be driving through one moment in time. We'll be driving through all of them at once. 5 years of crashes all happening simultaneously. You need to stop." But my foot wouldn't lift off the gas pedal. My hands wouldn't turn the wheel to pull over. It was like the car was driving itself, following the route it had taken hundreds of times before, unable to deviate. "I can't stop," I said, panic rising. "The car won't let me." "Then we're both trapped now, both caught in the loop. I'm sorry, Michael. I never meant to pull anyone else into this." We entered the hairpin turn at 35 km/h. Too fast, I knew it was too fast, but the car wouldn't slow down. In the rearview mirror, I saw Thomas brace himself, the same motion he'd made every night for months. And I saw something else. Other versions of him, other iterations from different nights, all layered on top of each other in the back seat. Dozens of Thomas Brennans, all dying at once, all trapped in their final moment. The car started to skid. I felt the tires lose traction, felt the vehicle beginning to slide toward the outside of the curve where the guardrail was weak and the drop was steep. Time slowed down. I could hear Thomas screaming, not just one voice, but dozens, all the trapped iterations crying out at once. And then, impossibly, I felt hands on the steering wheel. Not my hands, someone else's, overlaying mine, guiding the wheel hard to the left. Thomas's hands, bloody and mangled, but strong. He was helping me steer, fighting against the skid, trying to keep us on the road. The car shuddered, teetered on the edge of control, then caught traction again. We completed the turn without going over. The road straightened out, heading down toward the valley floor. In the back seat, Thomas was breathing hard. All the layered iterations collapsed back into one. "You saved us," I said, my own voice shaking. "I've seen this curve claim too many lives. I wasn't going to let it take yours too." He leaned back in the seat, looking exhausted. "But now the loop is broken. I felt it break when I touched the wheel, when I interacted with the physical world instead of just repeating my death. What happens now? I don't know. Maybe I finally move on. Maybe this was what I needed, to save someone instead of just dying over and over, to make my final ride mean something." We reached his destination, the house where I'd dropped him off hundreds of times. This time he opened the door himself. I heard the click, felt the car's weight shift as he stepped out. He stood on the curb and looked back at me, and for the first time, he smiled. "Thank you for driving me all these months, for not giving up on me. I think I can go home now. Really home." He closed the door and walked toward the house. But as he walked, he became transparent, fading like morning mist burning off in sunlight. By the time he reached the front door, he was gone completely. The app on my phone showed the trip complete. 5 stars, $15 tip. But this time I knew it was really over. I didn't get another request from Thomas B. the next night, or the night after that. For the first time in 8 months, 11:47 p.m. came and went without his name appearing on my screen. The loop was broken. He was free. But I'm not entirely free, because now every time I drive down 89A at night, every time I approach that hairpin turn at mile marker 345, I see them. Other ghosts, other drivers and passengers who didn't make the curve, who went over the side, who died on this mountain. They stand on the shoulder, looking for rides, hoping someone will help them complete their final journey. Most nights I keep driving past them. I learned my lesson with Thomas. You can help a ghost move on, but it costs you something. It pulls you partially into their world, blurs the line between the living and the dead. I'm not sure how many more times I can do that before I get stuck myself. But sometimes when I see someone who looks particularly lost, particularly desperate, I pull over. I accept the request that appears on my phone even though I know it's from someone who died years ago. And I drive them down the mountain through the curves they never survived, to destinations they never reached in life. Because someone has to. Someone has to bear witness to these final rides, these loops of tragedy playing out endlessly on a dangerous mountain road. And it might as well be me, the driver who learned that death isn't always the end, that some journeys continue long after the body stops, and that the most haunted roads aren't just haunted by the past. They're haunted by the present, by the ongoing tragedy of lives cut short, by the desperate need of the dead to complete what they started before accepting they're gone. I still drive for Uber in Jerome, still navigate the steep streets and hairpin turns of Highway 89A. But I'm not just driving tourists and locals anymore. I'm driving the dead too. The ones who need one last ride. The ones who can't move on until someone helps them complete their journey. And I wonder someday when my own time comes, if I'll find myself standing on Hull Avenue at 11:47 p.m., waiting for a driver who'll pick me up and take me down the mountain one final time. If I'll be the passenger with injuries that never heal, asking, "Are we almost there?" until someone brave or foolish enough helps me find my way home. That's the real horror of driving in Jerome. Not that the town is haunted. Everyone knows that, expects that, even enjoys that as part of its tourist charm. The real horror is that the haunting isn't just historical. It's ongoing, continuous, happening every night on roads that kill people with terrifying regularity. And if you drive long enough, if you work these roads enough nights, you stop being able to tell the difference between the living and the dead. You pick them both up. You drive them both to their destinations. And you pray you don't become one of them yourself. If this story made you think twice about accepting late-night ride requests, about passengers who don't speak or seem injured, about the same person requesting a ride from you night after night, hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment sharing your own experiences with passengers who seemed wrong, with rides that repeated themselves, with the growing certainty that not everyone in your back seat is actually alive. Maybe you've driven someone who died years ago. Maybe you've felt trapped in loops of your own, repeating the same journey endlessly. Maybe you've wondered if the road you're on leads somewhere real, or just circles back to the same moment of tragedy forever. You're not alone. We're all navigating a world where the dead sometimes need rides just as much as the living, where dangerous roads collect ghosts like toll booths collect coins, where the most routine pickup can turn out to be a journey between worlds. Thanks for listening to my story about Thomas Brennan and the hundreds of nights I drove him down a mountain he never survived. Thanks for understanding that some passengers need more than just transportation. They need witness, acknowledgement, someone to help them finally complete the ride that killed them. And if you ever find yourself picking up the same passenger night after night at the exact same time, pay attention to the details. Notice if their injuries never heal. Notice if they vanish without opening doors. Because you might be the only person who can help them break their loop and move on. Or you might be the next person trapped in it, endlessly repeating your own final ride.